On today's show, Cavs starting small forward DeAndre Hunter stops by. We talk about what the start of the season's been like for him and the Cleveland Cavaliers, a little bit of a new role that he's in this year with the Cavs compared to last year. And of course, we had to dive into his crossover of Josh Giddey from a couple of weekends ago, where he sent Giddey into another dimension and what it's like to do that on an NBA floor. So we'll do that. Plus, take a look at tonight's game against the Houston Rockets. And the Cavs were fined $100,000 by the NBA on Tuesday. That's just the price of doing business. We'll talk about it all on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over my Substack, The Inside Shot. And thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. And thank you to those of you everydayers that make Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day. It's because of people like you that the Locked On Podcast Network is now the #1 sports podcast network in America. You can find this show and any other Locked On podcast anywhere you get your podcast. That means Apple, that means Spotify, that means anywhere else. Please give us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and because you might be new to the show today with DeAndre Hunter coming on in just a second, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Cavs wherever you are listening. Again, that's Apple, that's Spotify, might be YouTube. If you're watching right now, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. In today's episode, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet just $5. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets used all across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. As I mentioned, DeAndre Hunter on today's show. I chatted with him Monday afternoon. So this was before the Cavs took on the Bucks. Cavs obviously won that game to move to 10-5 on the season. But we talk about what life is like early in the season, how much there is to read into, how the Cavs have looked, just kind of what they're doing in terms of searching for their identity, the role that he's playing this year compared to last year, and how it's been a bit of an adjustment for him. And of course, we do have to talk about the Josh Giddey crossover that he had a couple of weekends ago against the Chicago Bulls. So without anything else from me, here's my interview with DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre, very much appreciate you taking the time to jump on Locked On Cavs. Just wanted to check in, see how things are going so far as the start of the season. We're talking before the Milwaukee Bucks game. So you guys have played 14 games so far. And I'm curious from your perspective, with this being a group that is not the same exact one that we saw at the end of last season, just how much stock do you put into the way that a team starts off this season?
I wouldn't put much stock into it. I feel like in previous seasons, we've seen teams get off to hot starts. Kind of cool off by the All-Star break. And we've seen, teams who don't start up as hot, end the year well and, play well in the playoffs. So I wouldn't put much into it. Guys are new, systems are new, things are new, guys are trying to implement new things. So I think it takes time for those things to show itself.
For you personally, you are in a bit of a different role than you were last year, not only in Cleveland, but in Atlanta too, where you came off the bench for the most part during the 24-25 season. So how has and I know that you have been a starter for a good chunk of your career in Atlanta too, but how has fluctuating between the role you were in last year to the role that you have been so far to start this season with the Cavs been for you personally?
It hasn't been too hard. Like you said, I've started games in Atlanta for, majority of my career. So, coming off the bench was kind of something I was new to. So that was more of an adjustment than, than starting.
What do you remember about the process that brought you to Cleveland? Like, what do you remember about being told that you were being traded emotionally? What was that like for you? And just everything that goes into that being not just an NBA thing, but like, a big change in your life.
I think you just hear rumors. You hear your agent tell you things about teams that are interested in you, but you never really put any thought or, any kind of stock behind it because, anything's possible. So I was more so just leaning on that I'm staying. And during I think it was the day of the trade deadline, I got the call, from our GM in Atlanta. And then I got the call from Kenny and a GM here as well. So it kind of took me by surprise. And, it was obviously a lot of things that go into it behind the scenes that people don't really see. But, it was an exciting move being that I was in Atlanta my whole career, changing cities, changing basically everything was, it was fun for me. It was different. It was fun. I would prefer to do it, in the off season, but being as though it happened during the season, was a blessing.
Well, what's the toughest thing that people don't see about being traded? Because I think that so many people think of the NBA just like it's 2K and you can press a button and somebody gets traded and they instantly just pop up there and they don't realize all the other things that go into it. Like what was the toughest part that someone might not realize about that process?
Well, I was in Atlanta for 6 or 7 years, so that was my whole life was there. I had everything there. Family was there. And I think that's the biggest thing that people may not see is just, basically having to move your entire life to a different city within, basically a day or two, just to so you can have things to, lay back on. But like I said, I don't want to make it seem like it was the hardest thing in the world, but definitely, it's a challenge to happen during the season.
So now that you had a full off season as the member of the Cavs, you had a full training camp, a full preseason, things that you obviously didn't have last year. What do you feel like you gained the most by being able to go through all of those things before entering your first full season in Cleveland?
I would just say the trust of the coaches, and definitely, just the comfortable nature of being with my teammates, just being able to get to know my game, being able to know their game. And, to my first point, just gaining the trust of the coaches, showing them, what I can do on the floor and, how I can impact the game.
As you earn the trust of the coaches, the trust of your teammates, just how has your relationship with Kenny changed over the past 8 or so months since you've been in Cleveland? Because I think that is one that he's talked about certainly and like kind of seen you grow or at least, earn more trust with him and that relationship grow. What's that been like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we didn't talk much when I first got here, and I completely understand there was a lot going on. He was trying to get ready for the playoffs. We were the best team in the conference, so there was a lot going on at that time. So he couldn't really, hone in on me and learn me and figure me out. So over the off season, we had time to do that. He came to see me work out in LA. We spent some time together here in Cleveland as well. So our relationship is a lot better. I'm not saying it's finished or perfect by any means, but, we're definitely working in the right direction.
So as you guys continue to grow and get deeper into the season and get a little bit healthier and just kind of get your feet underneath you, I think the term that we've heard thrown around a lot, whether it's been by guys in the locker room or Kenny during a press conference, is growing pains, that you guys are kind of figuring yourselves out. You're figuring out your identity. You're figuring out what you can do, what you can't do. What do you think you've learned about this specific group that is, as we know, different than the one that you were on last year? But what have you learned about this specific group through some of those growing pains?
I would just say our resiliency. There's been a lot of different lineups. There's been guys in and out of the rotation. And I think with, all those things happening early on in the season, I don't think we ever falter. I don't think we ever look, out of character, out of order. Like you said, we might be at times where we don't look our best, but I think that's going to happen. Like we said, if there's going to be new guys and, different rotations. And like we said, it's just a completely different team. So I think to go through those growing pains and, still be one of the top teams in the conference, I think that says a lot.
So as you look at the things that you have gone through, what's the one specific thing other than resiliency, like a specific basketball thing that you say, okay, we're learning this about ourselves, and this is something that's going to be very useful when we do get to the end of the season, when we do get to what we believe will be a deep playoff run?
I believe it's I'll say two things: our defense and our defensive rebounding. I think those are the two things where, like you said, we kind of changed and tweaked our defense a little. And, we're still trying to learn that and, perfect that. And I think that's leading to us not being as effective on the glass. So I think when we, figure those two things out or one thing out, it's going to help with the other.
I'm curious from your perspective, too, because pace is up so much across the league. And you guys just went through a 5-game stretch in 7 nights where you played nothing but teams in the top 10 of pace across the NBA. Like, is that a change that you view as something that's good, or is that something that you guys look at and say, this is not necessarily our style? We need to kind of drop a little bit and play more of our brand of basketball, which might not be, not saying it's going to be the slowest thing in the world, but might not be the breakneck pace that you guys have been at.
I think that's the identity we're trying to push. That's something we've been working on since training camp. I don't see that slowing down. And, across the league, you can see everyone's playing a lot faster. So we're just trying to, do what we can do and play at our pace and, play at a sustainable pace for us. And, like I said, it's going to be growing pains. There's going to be times where it doesn't look good, but I think if we continue to work on it and get in-game reps, once the end of the season comes and playoffs comes, we'll be, a oil machine.
All right. Well, I can't have you on here and not ask about what I think has maybe been the moment of the year for the Cavs so far, which is your crossover of Josh Giddey a couple of weeks ago, where he actually had to go back and limp off to the locker room afterwards. Just like when you go through a moment like that, what goes through your mind as you see somebody that you don't have to lay a finger on him to get him to fall down? Like, what goes through your mind when you put that sort of crossover on somebody?
In the moment, I didn't even know what happened. I just thought, I made a good move. I just thought I kind of crossed him. And, I just tried to finish at the rim. But, once you see the replays and, you hear your teammates and things that they're saying, I kind of just wanted to see it. That was mostly what I was thinking in that time. I was just trying to see the replay to see, how bad it was, I guess.
How many times have you watched it?
A good amount.
And does the crossover take away from the fact that you actually put Patrick Williams on an absolute poster at the end of it? Because I feel like we look at that and we see the crossover and we lose sight of the fact that that was a really good dunk too in traffic.
Well, I appreciate that. The dunk hasn't been talked about at all. But I appreciate you for seeing that. But I think, the crossover is definitely the highlight of that, of that play. So I don't mind people not, paying attention to the dunk. It's all good.
I mean, the thing that I always think about too is because we've seen guys, and I think James Harden has done this maybe more than anybody. He'll put somebody just on their behind like that and then miss the shot. And it's like, yeah, the crossover is cool, but you didn't actually put points on the board. So I think that having to finish through contact, having to go up with the dunk, like super underrated because that was not an easy play for you to make. And I'll get you out of here with this, but I want to go back to your college days at Virginia, because you were on a team that won the national championship. You were on a team with a lot of NBA players. And I think it's cool that a lot of you guys, you, Ty, Mama Didi, Akite, Kyle Guy, Braxton Key, like you all to some extent made it to the NBA and you all came in together. Is there still a group chat between you guys? Like what's your relationship with the guys that you won a championship with at that level like?
So we kind of kept in contact for the first year or two after we after we won the championship and guys were going in their professional routes. But after that, people have their own lives, people have their own family. It's kind of tough staying in touch. So we kind of touch bases here and there. We have a Cavalier alumni group text where it's all the alumni, not just, guys from the championship team. So that's kind of where we get updates on each other. But me and Ty stay in touch probably the most. I touch base with Kyle here and there. And Jay and Mamadi, I see Jay when we play against them. Hopefully when we play against the Pacers, I'll see him. But honestly, I don't even know where Mamadi is right now. Mamadi does his own thing.
Yes, former member of the Cavs, Mamadi Diakite, doing his own thing. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. But DeAndre, very much appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
All right, thank you.
More Locked On Cavs coming up in just a second. But first, today's show brought to you by SKIMS. When SKIMS announced that they were making underwear for men, the reaction made perfect sense. People, that have been talking about SKIMS comfort for years, but most guys, though, stick to whatever they've been buying since college, high school, maybe even before that, right? You've probably worn the same style, maybe even the same brand of underwear, maybe your entire life, certainly your entire adult life, the same fits, the same waistband. You really don't change, right? Like you can just fall in love with the comfort of not even a comfortable pair of underwear, but just underwear that feels safe, right? Well, maybe it's time to step outside of your comfort zone and try SKIMS Men because they're going to change everything you know. It's an upgrade and it's obvious why everyone's been talking about it because it's so good. I didn't know what to expect. When SKIMS first showed up on my doorstep, I have been sent multiple packages from SKIMS now, and it's all I wear. It is my favorite underwear. I didn't know what to expect, but once I tried it, I understood why it's been such a successful brand because it truly is the best underwear that I've ever worn. They're designed to feel good, fit right, actually stay put. Like that to me is the biggest thing. I could not stand when underwear would ride up on your side, like your hip would bunch up and it would just drive me nuts. You have to try and find a way to adjust your underwear in public and nobody wants to ever do that. I don't have to do that with SKIMS because it keeps its shape. And that to me, the comfort is excellent. It's the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. The material is fantastic, but the fact that it holds its shape to me might actually be the best part. And there are a lot of good things. Like, it's not easy to pick a best part about it, but that might be it for me because I feel more confident. I feel more comfortable, and just life is better when I've got Skims underwear on for men. Maybe you want to sound like that. Maybe you are sick and tired of the underwear that you're not wearing because it's not Skims. So what you need to do is you need to shop Skims Men's right now at skims.com. That is SKIMS.com. And when you place your order, choose podcast in the post-purchase survey and select this show from the dropdown to let them know that we sent you again. And the Skims holiday shop is open. So if you're looking for the perfect gift this season, Skims has you covered. Again, head to skims.com. That is SKIMS.com to shop Skims Men's now. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back. We had another great night of action on Tuesday night. There will be another great night of action tonight on Wednesday night. And there's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or if you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score first to who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks and everything in between. FanDuel has it all. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for your shot at a bigger payout. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is the one that's making that late push, the way the Cavs have lately, right? They did against Memphis. They did against Milwaukee. As of right now, they're a very slight favorite over the Houston Rockets on Wednesday night. We'll see what happens. Maybe they'll make another late push to win a game on Wednesday night. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So all you have to do, head to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen each and every day. Thanks again to DeAndre Hunter for joining the show earlier this week. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks to Cavs PR for setting that up. And the Cavs are back in action tonight against the Houston Rockets. And to me, this is the first showdown game the Cavs have had since opening night. And yes, there will be some sort of overreaction to this game, win or lose, I think. And it's going to be a little bit unfair because the Cavs are not whole right now. Darius Garland is not playing in this game. Jalen Tyson is not playing in this game. Sam Merrill is questionable. He left the game briefly on Monday against the Bucks, came back, had a great fourth quarter, but he's questionable with a right hand sprain for this game. But if you look at this schedule, and the Cavs it's interesting to me because I think for some people, when the Cavs started off 3-3, it almost felt like the sky was falling a little bit. And the Cavs have not played their best basketball so far this year. And they have not looked the way that we thought they would look. They've not necessarily looked like a championship team. Now, you don't have to do that in November. Like, nothing says, yes, you need to be a championship team in November in order to win the title. That's not how this works. You can't get off to a horrible start, which the Cavs have not done. But they've won 7 out of 9, and it hasn't necessarily felt like it because they've not been putting together dominant performances. And yes, the schedule at times has been a little light. Like, Memphis is a terrible team. Milwaukee without Giannis is not good. I think even if Giannis would have not gotten hurt, the Cavs still would have won that game. Miami is a solid team. Like, they've gotten some good wins, some bad losses, and there's certainly the loss to Miami is not a good loss. The loss to Toronto, neither of them are great losses, although I do think both of them are pretty explainable when you take just a little bit of a deeper look. But overall, the Cavs have won 7 out of 9 to move to 10-5, and it hasn't necessarily felt like they've won 7 out of 9. Like, it hasn't been the most impressive stretch of basketball that they've ever played. And I think they would be the first ones to tell you that. I mean, even Kenny Atkinson after the game on Monday night basically got up there and he didn't sound like a coach that had just won a basketball game, which is a difficult thing to do. But I look at this as the first showdown game the Cavs have had since opening night. And opening night was obviously in New York. The Cavs lost against the Knicks, and that was a Cavs team that was without 2 of its starters in Darius Garland, and DeAndre Hunter did not play in that game either. And Darius Garland not going to play in this game, and Sam Merrill might not be playing in this game too. So the Cavs might be without, they might be without 2 starters for all intents and purposes for this game too. But I look at the rest of their schedule, and I think they've got some nice wins, but they've not had a game like this one. They've not had a measuring stick game. And I am curious if the Cavs view a game like this in the month of November like it's a measuring stick game. If this game were to happen in February or March, I think the answer is probably a little bit different than if it happens in November. But even if you want to look at the game because their best win, and Donovan Mitchell referenced this the other night after the game against the Bucks, their best win is the win in Detroit. It was, for them, the third game in 4 nights. It was the second night of a back-to-back. And yeah, the travel from Cleveland to Detroit is like a 19-minute flight. It's not a big deal. It's a flight that I've made more times than I would like to say, because it's just like comical that there's actually a direct flight from Cleveland to Detroit, but you can't fly a lot of places from Cleveland, but you can get to Detroit, which is a different conversation for an entirely different podcast, but I digress. But the Pistons have not lost since that night. So like that win looks better and better and better, especially when you consider the Cavs were leading by 35 points in that game. And I know they only ended up winning by like 22 or whatever the final score was, but like that was a very, very good win. But that didn't feel like a showdown game, because at that point, the Pistons weren't what they are right now. They hadn't gone on this 11-game winning streak that they're currently on, where this feels like it because, and even if the Cavs played the Pistons tomorrow, I don't think that would necessarily qualify, because for as good as the Pistons have been, it is easy. And I'm not saying that I am doing this, but I think it's easy to poke holes in what they have done to get to 11-2. The teams that they have beaten, or whatever the record is, 12-2. The teams that they have beaten have not necessarily been the best. Now, they got a nice win over the Hawks last night, and that's a good Hawks team who has been good since Trae Young exited the lineup. And the Cavs win over Atlanta looks better, actually, than I think it did the night they beat them. But I look at that and say, does anybody really take them seriously? And I'm not saying it's like a playoff team, because I do think they are a playoff team, but does anybody buy that the Detroit Pistons could win the title this year? No. They're a fun, nice story that looks like they have a nice future ahead of them, but they're not there right now. People believe the New York Knicks can, and people believe that the Houston Rockets can. Now, it might not be the most likely thing in the world, but people do believe the Houston Rockets can win the title. And this is the first time since opening night that the Cavs are facing a team that other people believe is capable of winning the championship. So I think because of that, this is a little bit of a statement game. And the Cavs have not played their best basketball. And I'm not going to sit here and I expect them to flip a switch tonight, because that would be unfair. And I think that would be setting unfair expectations. But I do wonder if they're going to have a little bit of a higher intensity. Like I wonder if playing an opponent the caliber of the Houston Rockets is going to be something that is able to just squeeze a little bit more out of them than what we have seen lately. Like I thought we might get it in that game against the Bucks. And I do wonder if Milwaukee just coming out on fire to start that game, where they were 4 for 4 to start the game. 3 of those were threes, and they took an 11-2 lead. I wonder if that is something that like determined the way that game was going to go. Now, the Cavs did a great job of responding to that, which I think is the very important thing to take away from that. But I'm very interested to see how the Cavs come out in this game. I'm curious to see if they can take themselves to a level they haven't been at consistently enough, because I do think at times they've played down to their opponent. I wonder, because the Rockets so far this year have been a better team than the Cavs. I wonder if on Wednesday night they could play up to their opponent. And if they can, is that something that they can carry over moving forward? That is one of the things that I'm most fascinated about between the Cavs and the Rockets on Wednesday night. Now, you may have seen in the news, the Cavs were fined $100,000 on Tuesday. It's just the price of doing business. Now, it's not my money, but I'm going to talk about it because I think it's an interesting thing that the NBA did. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's SAD, software as a service. And that is why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. Rippling helps remove the bottlenecks and busy work that slow teams down, and everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use, gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything that they touch. And even better, right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnba. That is Rippling, RIPPLING.com/lockedonnba, LOCKEDONNBA. Again, rippling.com/lockedonnba for 6 months free. Thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first watch on YouTube. If you are watching right now, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And on Tuesday, the NBA put out a release that they were fining the Cleveland Cavaliers $100,000. Now, I don't often talk about when teams or players get fined because it's not necessarily, to me, all that interesting. But I think the release here is important to read. So the NBA announced today that the Cleveland Cavaliers have been fined $100,000 for violating the league's player participation policy. The violation occurred when the Cavaliers held Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, who are both star players under the policy, out of the team's game against the Miami Heat on November 12th for rest. The policy, which was adopted prior to the 2023-24 season, is intended to promote participation in the NBA's regular season. Now, as I mentioned, this is not my money, right? The NBA is not taking away $100,000 from Danny Cunningham. So it's easy for me to say, well, that's just the cost of doing business. But I also know that $100,000 to Dan Gilbert, to the Cavaliers, is not exactly the largest dent in the pocketbook. It's not nothing, but it's not the largest dent in the world. And the Cavaliers rested Donovan and Evan for that second game in Miami, if you think back to it. And that was actually the game in Miami they won. Craig Porter Jr. was fantastic. Naquan Tomlin did some really good things. The Cavs found a way to come back after trailing all night and pulled away in the fourth quarter with an improbable victory. And the Cavs rested those guys because, while yes, it's easy to say there was no travel before that game. They were in Miami from Sunday. They had a day off before. All those things are true. But for the Cavs, that was their fourth game in 6 nights, and they played the next night. So they had a 5-game stretch in 7 nights, which, as I have talked about several times on this podcast, is a really, really difficult thing to do. And for the Cavaliers to be a team that is going to be judged on what happens in the postseason, right? Like, there's no debate about that. And that's why I think this regular season is actually very interesting, the way we view things. But they're going to be judged on what they do in April, May, and June. And I do not think that allowing guys like Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, and Darius Garland didn't play in that game either, but that was for different reasons. That was not rest purposes. I don't think that playing those guys 5 times in 7 nights makes any sense. It's not something, if I were the Cavs, it's not something I would do. And I know that there's going to be a faction of fans that, shakes their fist and said, back in my day, the players played basketball games. Back in my day, they didn't sit out for rest purposes. That's fine. They may have. But I also think the NBA is smarter right now. I think that the NBA is more analytically driven. And ultimately, the end goal for the Cavs is not to find a way to beat the Miami Heat, which they did in this game, not to find a way to beat the Miami Heat on Wednesday, November 12th. The goal for the Cavs is to find a way to win the NBA championship when the time arrives in June. Now, does Donovan Mitchell playing for the 4th time in 6 nights and ultimately 5 times in 7 nights help the Cavs to win a title? I don't think so. Does Evan Mobley playing 5 times in 7 nights help the Cavs to win a title? I don't think so. I believe the Cavs have 2 more stretches of 5 games in 7 nights. One of them is coming up in a couple of weeks, where they have a Sunday game, a Monday game. I believe it is then a Wednesday game and a Friday, Saturday back to back. And I would imagine that over that stretch, the Cavs are not going to play Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell in all 5 of those games. It doesn't make sense for them to. Now, if they want to save themselves $100,000, I would imagine Donovan Mitchell gets listed as out with a sore hamstring for one of those games, and maybe Evan Mobley has a little bit of a minor ankle sprain, and that's what it looks like on the injury report, because we have seen teams do that so many times where they have a bit of a phantom injury. We've seen that plenty of times. Just term it injury management, and you seem to not get fined for it, because if it is an injury, you can't get fined. You're holding guys out as a precaution. The Cavs might do that instead. But I look at this and just say, yeah, it costs the Cavs $100,000, but I think ultimately $100,000 is a small price to pay to make sure that your team is in the best possible shape that it can possibly be in, because that's what's important to the Cavs. They want to keep their guys healthy. They want their guys to go through the season the best way that's fit for them. They shouldn't play 5 games in 7 nights. They have a stretch, like I said, coming up soon. They've got another one right out of the All-Star break. Maybe that one makes a little bit of sense because they have 9 days off before it starts. But overall, What do the Cavs gain by playing those guys 5 times in 7 nights? I don't think anything. And I think ultimately this $100,000 fine, and it's easy to say again, it's not my money. And I'm sure if I asked Dan Gilbert, what's it like to be fined $100,000, he might feel differently than I do about this. But I look at that and say, you know what? This, for the Cavs to be in the position they want to be in, $100,000 is a fine price to pay. Truthfully, to me, this is just the cost of doing business. So thank you, because that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Cavs. Like I said, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Big thanks to DeAndre Hunter for taking the time out of his day earlier this week, hanging out on the show for a little bit. Thank you to Cavs PR for helping to set that up. And if you're watching the show on YouTube as we get out of here, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And I will be back first thing tomorrow morning talking about the Cavs taking on the Houston Rockets.